Hey, what's up? What is up, community? Glad y'all tuning in, man. We're gonna have a good show today. It's gonna be me and my partner Sophia, as usual, and we're gonna be
Hello.
just hello. How you doing today?
Really good. Can't complain. I am blessed.
Blessed by
Blessed.
God. Yes,
That's
like,
right.
like and subscribe to our channel because it's like subscribing to God Himself. You'd like to do that, wouldn't you? Yes. No, yeah, man. We have more subscribers. We have more people engaging. Um, and we had some really interesting feedback from last week's show. Some negative comments, but it's all good, man. Y'all are helping our algorithm. You're helping us, man. And we want to build this channel out so that we can create a community where we can discuss, sensitive topics that are kind of hard to talk about. And so I wanted to go before I get into the show, which we're going to actually be talking about doubt in Christianity and religion, right? But before we did that, I just wanted to kind of go over really quick because I know we have a lot to pile in today. It's going to be a huge show today, so I wanted to pile in or make sure that we cover everything as quick as possible. I'll try not to bloviate. So I wanted to just kind of look at some of the comments from last week so we can address them and interact with you guys because we do appreciate the feedback, even if it isn't really positive. If you don't like what we're doing, give us a thumbs down. If you like what we're doing, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to us so you can keep up with all the content. But we have a comment that came in last week, and I'm kind of starting from the top from at Louis Cat 5984, and he said Wes wasn't even trying to smash Billy. Facts destroyed Billy. Wes just came in and said what he knew. Wes can easily have his information Googled while Billy's information sounds true. It's all from made up stories. And so last week's show, as you remember, is Wes Huff worse than Billy Carson? And so Sophia, you responded to him and you said that all those stories are made up. Show proof that the Bible is the Word of God, for example. It's really hard to really do that. And so that's really the crux of it. What do you think?
Exactly. All those stories are told by people, and anybody can claim that it was inspired by God. So that's the problem with the whole thing. So if you're sitting
Right.
there saying, "Oh, his stories were made," whoops, what happened?
No, go right ahead. I'm just playing a little
Oh,
background music. We're in a coffee
it's
shop,
a,
in a
it's just a
lounge,
little
having a
loud.
nice.
It's
It's a little
a
loud
little
for you.
loud in mine, yeah, on my
Yeah.
end.
Okay. How about that? Because it comes out
I
so
was like,
low.
"What?"
But go
Yeah,
ahead,
it's
Sophia.
better. Anyway, yeah, so that's the problem with it. And you could say on the other side that what Wes Huff said is also easily, you can look up information on that and debunk it. Simple as that.
Right. I agree 100%. And so then we had a comment coming in from Idly by 5002. He simply says, "No, there, I fixed it for you. Heavens to Betsy, guys. What a mess." So I'm not sure what he was referring to. And so I actually
Well,
responded and I said, then you must believe the Gospels are eyewitness accounts as Wes claims, because that was the claim is that he's making, is that, and we are addressing that with other scholars. So we're appealing to scholars. This isn't really us coming off like we're the know-it-alls, right? We're just presenting what the historians and scholars have to say about the Bible. And Wes is a supporter of the Bible and a supporter that the Gospels are eyewitness accounts. And he appeals to, letters of Paul, all of them as inspired. Go ahead.
right. But what I saw was, because I upload our videos on my channel as well, and Oh wow, somebody's mowing the lawn. I hope y'all can't hear that.
Can't hear it.
You can?
Cannot.
Okay, good. Um, so yeah, on my channel, the comments were just going out of control, and
Mm.
basically what it comes down to, it was a bunch of Christian apologists, and they all say the same thing. Who are you? Do you have credentials? Um, what scholars? And then when you tell them the scholars, oh well, that dude is gay, so we're not going to listen to him. Okay, what about the Jewish rabbi who will know the Bible better than you probably? And no, he don't know what he's talking about either. So the only thing that's acceptable to them are Christian apologist scholars, or scholars who agree with Christian apologists. There's a straight up bias there. You know what I mean?
And the funny thing is, the so-called gay guy was a scholar. I mean, he was teaching a class and he filmed it. So I'm not really sure why they dismiss one over the other because he was gay. That's kind of a fallacy. Guilt by
Has nothing to do.
association has nothing to
Has
do with
nothing to
it.
do with the information that's presented. And if it's factual, it's factual. It don't matter who presents it. And so
That's right.
basically, basically none of them had a real argument. It was just all attacks and
Yeah.
attacking my intelligence and saying it was low quality and all that kind of dumb stuff. And this is coming from Christians who are supposed to be humble, and
Yeah, like
where,
a
where's
lot of these a
where's your
lot of these comments are stuff like, "Are you people biblical scholars? You guys must be scholars or something." And who are these people? Criticizing someone who learned the scriptures in its original language, studied it for a majority of life, and became a scholar. Yeah, well, we were appealing to people who did the same thing. It's just that they were real scholars and real teachers, not people that are YouTube phenomenons like Wes and Billy Carson and people like that. And so, really, the entire point is simple. Christianity is not as special as many Christians like to think it is. And that's no disrespect intended. Everything is connected to everything. That's just how reality works, right? The Christian religion is not immune to influence. It's like
right,
any other religion. It's evolved over time. It's been influenced by other cultures and traditions, and it happens to actually win out as a religion because of that virtue itself. The fact that it's
right,
so
because
adaptable.
it's adaptable, yeah. And you can see that over time. There's been a lot of changes, new translations. And what do you think happens every time you translate it again? There are going to be
Right.
changes. And
Always.
to say that it's always the same and it's never changed is BS. To me,
Exactly.
to me, these Christian apologists are almost like agents of the Matrix, and they're like, "Oh no, you got to stay within this paradigm. You can't think outside of that at all, because that's what God said." And then they just go around and try to intimidate people to keep you in line. You know, Scott, I don't see you anymore. Not sure what happened, but I don't see nothing. I'm gonna back out and come back in and see if that does anything. Don't know what happened to Scott. I'm here
I'm
by
back.
myself. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I just had a crash, man. My computer was. I didn't have the. I'm on a laptop, so my power went out, and I didn't even notice it wasn't plugged up. But
Uh-oh.
yeah, let me just make sure my settings are still right, which I think they are. Thank goodness. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Anyways, continue. What were you saying?
No, I was just saying that Christian apologists remind me of like Matrix agents because
Mm-hmm.
they're all like, it's almost like a cult, and they're just running around and telling people, oh, you got to think in this paradigm, like the thought police, and try to just go around and enforce this doctrine and trying to keep everybody in line. And that's what makes it so unappealing. Like nobody wants to be forced, you know.
That's right.
We all
That's
should
right.
we all should be able to have a conversation, you know,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man.
without being told, oh, you're going to hell and you're going to be judged. And yesterday I was being called heretics and all kinds of stuff. Like, what?
Yeah. Is everything still looking good as far as the video and everything? I'm getting weird messages on my thing here.
I'm not sure. You look a little dark. You could use some lighting.
Hey, man. That's just because I've been in the sun for a while.
Not you, the lighting.
I know. Well, okay. All right. So, what I wanted to do now at this point, I wanted to really get into the meat of the discussion here and kind of go over a few videos from a few people that talk about the doubt. You know, the topic today is doubt in Christianity and Abrahamic religions. Again, we're not picking on Christianity. It's just that in this country, it's the biggest, you know, Abrahamic religion that we have, and we're here to help people maintain their faith in whatever it is their path is in spirituality. Because I truly believe that all experience is just a path. You know, whether you're an atheist, a Christian, a pagan, a pantheist, whatever you call yourself, whatever you want to identify as, that's your life path right now. And it's something that you experience. And so with Christianity, though, you know, we were talking about doubt last week, especially in some of the forums that I'm part of. And so I kind of wanted to go over that since I was actually talking a lot about it. So the point is that Christians do doubt at times, okay? They doubt maybe the Bible's true. They doubt whether God exists, or they doubt whether God approves of them for many reasons. And so for this reason, in the Christian community, we have Christian apologists, right? And they're not here to apologize for being Christian. Their job is really to make a case for why belief in the Christian God, in the Bible in general, or in a particular interpretation of the Bible, or in God's nature, is maybe valid or true, or a good thing. So the apologist's job is to kind of create certainty in their faith. And so oftentimes Christian apologists will debate skeptics. Skeptics are the people that do harm in promoting certainty about like any number of things, really. So in this context, skeptics will challenge the Christian apologists and seek to create certainty with the Bible or with belief in the Christian God or one's interpretation of those foundations, right? So what I wanted to do was kind of look at some of these videos. I have one regarding Life Church, and there's a pastor at this channel called Life Church who's explaining that doubt is actually normal in Christian life and not anything, you know, that we should be ashamed of. You know what I'm saying? It's actually part of being a Christian is to have doubt. You know, we've heard of doubting Thomas, for example. So what I wanted to do is go ahead and present. Let's see here. I wanted to share screen with this Life Church. So here it is, and I'll go ahead and let this roll.
It's funny how we are in human nature. One person said, I didn't know pastors had problems. Most of them don't, but whenever God was handing out the pastors don't have problem card after I graduated from seminary, I missed that day. I missed the card. It's a funny thing about human nature that when we see other people struggle, sometimes it makes us feel better, and it makes me feel so much better that the disciples saw the resurrected Christ and some of them still doubted. Because I can feel so close to God sometime and then still have doubts. I don't know if you can relate, but there are times when it's almost like God is so real I can almost touch him. I believe he's good. I believe he's with me. If you told me like God's not real, I'm like, your mama's not real. It's that personal. And then other times it can be like I'm in the middle of the presence of God, like in church or something, and all of a sudden with all these other people around, all this spiritual stuff, like, is this stuff real? I mean, what if we're just like making this stuff up? I mean, I prayed about this and God didn't show up, and it can be really, really, really scary and lonely in Christian circles when you start to doubt. It's scary and you want to ask questions, but sometimes you wonder, am I the only one? And if I ask this, what are they going to think about me? And so you might want to ask, but you feel guilty and you feel ashamed. And I am convinced, just in my pastoral tenure, that there are some people that are leaving the church not because God isn't good, but because they have questions they don't feel safe asking.
So as when you were a Christian, have you ever experienced that doubt yourself, Sophia?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't feel secure, and that's what made me leave Christianity, because it just didn't really answer a lot of questions. I will say that when I read the New Testament, that actually benefited me, and I could tell that there was truth to it, because when you apply it to your life, you can see the results. That was something tangible. But that was more on a psychological, spiritual level. But when I was reading the Old Testament, I would ask myself, what is this even, you know? And there was such a stark difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament that I was just conflicted all the time. And I eventually I had to leave it, because nobody wants to be in a relationship where you constantly feel unsafe and unsure and conflicted, you know?
Right. I know that's what eventually got me out of my cult, which was Jehovah's Witnesses, and I went off to other churches and explored and all of that stuff, and I also went through a lot of doubt, you know, and so it's kind of normal. I would agree with the pastor here. So I mean, it's something that, you know, a lot of people deal with, and he continues, and I'm going to just kind of forward it over about needing details.
That God is not distant in your doubts. Somebody needs to hear this. Jesus is not a standoff savior. He's willing to be touched. If he feels far away, reach out to him, because he's reaching out for you. You can ask questions. You can take your frustrations to him. You can wrestle with him. You can complain. You can tell him that you don't understand. Thomas asked questions. Thomas needed answers. Thomas got answers. And what did he do? He served Jesus faithfully. In fact, tradition tells us this. Tradition tells us that after preaching Jesus, that Thomas was actually martyred in India in the year 72 AD or so, when he wouldn't back away from his faith in Christ, and they drove a stake through his stomach because he would not surrender the lordship of Christ. Proving to us, and I hope you feel this, when you have questions, when you have doubts, your doubts don't disqualify your faith. Your faith is a journey. It's never a destination. And so what's going to happen at some point in your life, in the life of a friend, a classmate, a child, a brother, a sister, there's going to be a question. You're gonna have a doubt. You're gonna have a moment of insecurity. You're gonna want some details. You're gonna want an answer and you don't have an answer yet. And your spiritual enemy, the devil, is gonna try to use your doubt to drive you away from God. It's gonna tell you you're not a real believer. You don't have perfect faith. This stuff's not real. Church doesn't care about you.
This is my favorite part because this music is very touching when he says this.
God's not involved in your life. He's not good. He doesn't love you. He's not with you. He hadn't really forgiven you. You've been too bad. You've been too filthy. After what you said, after what you did, after what you think, after how you act, after how you behave, he doesn't love you. And the devil is going to try to use your doubt to drive you away from God. But I came to tell somebody today that God can use your doubt to draw you to himself.
All right, so he's pretty much established doubt and how you can overcome it through your faith.
But no, has he really established how to overcome it? I'm
No.
questioning that because all I see is gaslighting, and it goes back to you doubting yourself.
That's right.
You're bad. You didn't do good enough, and that's not even the problem. The problem is you're teaching me that a man was also God, that he physically died, and then he came back to life. But that was 2,000 years ago. So now, how do I actually believe that this person is still alive? How do I imagine him being alive? Do I picture him sitting next to me at all times? Like, how do I go about realizing that this Jesus is there when I reach out to him? How do I talk to him? How can I see him?
He talked about at the top how, even those who walked with Jesus doubted him. The doubting Thomas, all these other people. But the weird thing about that is, I never doubt you, Sophia. I never doubt you exist. Because I can see you, I talk to you, same with my mom, my friends, everybody. I never have the same doubts as, say, when I doubt God or Jesus' existence the way that they present all of these things, right? I doubt that because it's not the same relationship. Like, I have a relationship with you because you're a real fucking person, number one. And that's the first thing.
But see, that's why you gotta watch. You gotta listen closely to what these people say, and it's the first thing I noticed about that segment.
Mm-hmm.
Notice he said, even the disciples who saw the risen Jesus, the resurrected Jesus. He didn't say even the disciples who saw him get resurrected. Right? There's a difference.
Mm-hmm. What you see, what you touch, what.
Mm-hmm.
That means they didn't actually see him come back to life. They just were told he came back to life.
Exactly. And that's the difference between having a relationship with someone that exists and with some imaginary sort of figure. Because why would you be having problems with doubt? If I went to somebody and complained, I like Sophia a lot, we have a lot of great conversations, I really enjoy our relationship, but sometimes I just doubt whether she even exists. Sometimes I'd wonder, does she really exist? Does she really mean, are these things she says, were they really said? Are they really meant that way? Like, they would think I was crazy, that I was in some kind of, delusion psychosis, yeah. And so we've got Dr. Charles Stanley, and he kind of talks about that it's not enough to just imagine and read the Bible and go to church. There's more to it. You have to actually meet God and have that relationship with God. But my question is that even possible? But let's see what he's got to say.
What you feel. But you see, all that surface. Intimacy goes much deeper than what you see, what you touch, what you feel. And what I want us to look at in this message today is, what does it mean to have an intimate relationship with God through his son, Jesus Christ? Now, some people have a difficult time with that, and this is the reason. They would say, well, If God is who he says he is, and that he's holy and he's righteous and transcendent above us, and he's sovereign and all these other things, and how can I, a sinner, have a personal, intimate relationship with a holy God? How's that possible? That's what I want to explain. Because it is possible. It is the will of God for every single one of his children to have an intimate relationship with him, which means just being saved is not enough. Just going to church is not enough, and reading the Bible and all the rest. It's relationship. And we live in a day when it seems that most people are having difficulty having a relationship. There's all kind of things that go on in people's lives, but intimacy is not one of them. I want you to turn, if you will, to the 63rd Psalm, because if there's anyone in the Old Testament who certainly had an intimate relationship with God, it was David. Was he perfect? No, he was not. He was a sinner just like all of us have sinned against him. And so what I want you to see is, here is the expression of a man's heart. Here is evidence of a man's intimate relationship with the Father. And so beginning in this 63rd chapter of the Psalms, I want to begin in verse 1, which says, O God, you are my God. I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you, in a dry and weary land where there is no water.
Now, here's a question. Look at that verse. Listen to what he just said. He just said that it's not enough to go to church. It's not enough to read the Bible. And then he quotes us a Bible verse for how David, as an example, is building a relationship with the Father, or Yahweh. He says, "Oh God, you are my God. I shall seek you earnestly." You know, if we compare that to, like we were saying before, I don't have to seek you out. You know, you're here, you exist. You know, my mother exists, my father, my friends, everybody, they exist. I don't really have to seek them out. And so is this really equating the same problem? Because you got to understand, it's still true that Christians doubt. They doubt the existence of God. They doubt these things.
Well, I think
How does
that's
that make
kind of
sense?
I think it's actually a little bit sadistic, because just think of God as being the Father, like he said, which is like a parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine you're a parent and you have a child, and then you go hide away from your child and make it the responsibility of the child. And you're just hiding away from motherfucker, you know? And then you're off the fight. And
You're kind of cutting out. You're kind of cutting out, Sophia.
Is everything better now? Hold on.
Let's see. Go ahead. Yeah, you kind of froze
Everything
up.
better now?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm back.
Yep, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. It's not even showing on my side. Like,
I know.
anyway, I was saying it's kind of sadistic in a way, because if God is like a parent, call him the Father, right? Imagine a parent having a child and then hiding away from that child and just abandoning that child. And the child has to find the parent. And then you're like, hey, you got to believe I'm here, even though I just abandoned you, or you can't see me. And then making it the child's responsibility to find the parent. That's what that sounds like to me. And then he says that this scripture proves that he had a personal relationship with God, when in actuality, all it proves is that he desperately is trying to find God. That's it.
Right. That's what I got out of it too. And it seems kind of sadistic. It's kind of like a father who says, you know, son, of course I exist. I know I'm not there in your life. I know I don't live in your house with you and you can't see me ever. I left you a book. I left you a book about me. Read the book about me and I'll be there. Just ask in your mind, be there with me in feeling and spirit, and I'll be there. That's good enough. You know, that's kind of the problem that a lot of Christians have that's fueling their doubt. And it's a psychological thing, and it's very real. And so this is why I kind of wanted to present this other video. Now, this was a debate. Again, like I said, Dinesh D'Souza, is being challenged by Alex O'Connor, who is a skeptic. And so he's kind of bringing up these things, these reasons for why people have problems with the Bible and with this Bible God and this Christian God. And so I kind of wanted to show a little bit, some segments of that, two parts that I thought were very interesting and kind of hit that point. So I want to go ahead and share this right now and see what you guys think.
4 guys are telling you their point of view, right?
Yeah, none of them the women who actually discovered the tomb, by the way.
No, you're not hearing from the women. I agree. You're 4 male gospel writers, apparently. I lost my train of thought for a second. Sorry.
I also don't want to get too caught up on this specific example, but I suppose we'll have to sort of leave it with the audience in the live stream. The point that I'm trying to make is that the historicity of at least some of this is important for Christianity. The historicity of the life of Jesus. Like if it were discovered historically speaking that a man called Jesus never existed, that would completely undermine Christianity.
Are you
That's
saying
important.
that?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Of course I'm not saying
Let me
that.
ask you a different
I'm
question.
saying that historically it matters. The crucifixion, the resurrection, these are matters which historically matter to Christians. And so when we're dealing with a historical account of what happened, when they're riddled with contradictions, I think that that's a problem. If you don't think that's a problem, then that's fine. But I think that the people listening and wanting to find out if the Bible is true might see that as reason to undermine the trust of the text.
No, first of all, almost everything that we know about those events in terms of modern historical reliability, for example, where is the site of Jesus's crucifixion? Yeah. Unknown.
Allegedly
disputed. There are a couple of potential sites, but it's not known. What day of the year was Jesus born? Unknown. Mm-hmm. We think Jesus lived for 33 years, but let's say that one of the Gospels said it was 33 and the other one said it was 34. Do you think that would actually refute Christianity?
No.
No, it would not.
No.
It would actually be quite understandable that you'd have 2 guys. And they would get that, and they'd be off on that, and this contradiction would be trivial because the issue is not whether Jesus lived for 33 or 34 years old.
Right,
the issue is something.
That's a different kind. Because if you could tell me that the reason why they had specifically chosen those ages was to serve a theological point, knowing that they're willing to sort of adapt history in order to make a theological point. I wouldn't say that point alone undermines Christianity. What I would say is that it undermines our trustworthiness in the Bible. I'm not saying that any one of these contradictions can tell us Christianity is false.
No, but I'm saying
firstly, the question is not if Christianity is true, it's whether the Bible is true. It may be the case that a man called Jesus came down to earth, rose from the dead. It's just that the gospel accounts get the details wrong, which mean that the Bible is not correct, but the story that the Bible tells is true. It means that Christianity is true, but the Bible is false. That's perfectly consistent.
I'm simply saying that what you're doing is you are supplying a motive that is completely made up, and that I could engage in exactly. Let's just take, for example, the 33 versus the 34 years. Now, here's what I'm saying. If there was such a contradiction and I were being you, I would say, oh, the reason that Matthew said it was 33 is because 3 is the number of the Trinity. And so 33 has a certain theological resonance because 3 and 3 is 33. Hold on. And then I would come around and say, well, the reason the other guy said 34 is actually 3 plus 4 is 7. God made the world in 7 days. 7 is known to be a number fraught with theological significance. And I'm saying this is basically Alex BS.
Dinesh, the gospel writers tell us that's why it happened. They say that the reason the family went to Egypt was to fulfill the prophecy of Hosea.
Okay, and so
in other words, if the gospel writer, and now imagine that the gospel writers had written what you just said. Imagine in the actual text, one of them said he was 33 when he died because of the number 3 in its significance.
Correct.
And another said that he was 34 because of the number 4 in its significance. That would be a contradiction. And in that instance, not just a historical contradiction, but a spiritual and theological one too.
Actually, no, it actually wouldn't.
Oh, come on.
It wouldn't. I'll tell you why.
You don't think that's a contradiction?
No, it's not a contradiction at all. Because the gospel writers are constantly
contradicting each other.
No, not contradicting each other. if they were constantly contradicting each other, you wouldn't have spent half an hour on a single event that frankly I haven't even heard of. In fact, no one's ever heard of. I've never ever heard anyone discuss this in any context. So you fish out this,
which event?
This prophecy about Hosea. I'll go back and look at all this, but what I'm trying to get at is, if you had a plethora of contradictions, you wouldn't be spending the entire debate on one that I'm...
Look at Alex O'Connor, how he's like so surprised, like this guy doesn't even understand what he's even referring to. And he's almost gaslighting people for not understanding or making it a big deal. Like, we don't have a right.
He's getting all bent out of shape and grasping at straws, and he's trying to restate what the guy is saying, and he's distorting what this guy is actually saying. And now he's making it his own point, which is a completely distorted point of what the guy is actually making.
Yeah, amazing. So let me continue this segment, and I wanted to get into the other part about the science part.
I'm sure no one in the audience has heard of either.
Hold on.
But okay, you've heard of it. Probably because you've been listening to his YouTube channel, right?
You don't think that this is a highly discussed point of contention in the Gospels, the flight to Egypt and its contradiction with
the flight to Egypt. Look, the flight to Egypt is an important event in the Gospel. I'm not saying.
Dinesh, also you said, why could you only bring up this one example? Take your pick. The date of Jesus' crucifixion, whether they're to take a staff or not to take a staff, the dating of Jesus flipping the tables at the temple, Mary Magdalene and what she says at the tomb, when the temple curtain rips. In the Gospel of Luke, it says that this happens before Jesus' death, and in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, it says that it happens afterwards. We can go through any of these contradictions that you like, but the problem is that what you're going to tell me is that it's trivial, and then when I try to explain that it's not trivial, you say, oh, well, I haven't even heard of it and no one else really cares about this, when other people do, by the way. This is a highly discussed point of contention in the Gospel. All I'm asking you to do is say that this is... when I mentioned the staff in my opening statement, and I said that whether or not they take a staff is a totally trivial contradiction, I'm not bothered by that. If I were a Christian, I would say, yeah, of course, because the texts are not going to perfectly accord. But for some reason, Augustine could not accept this, and so comes up with this ludicrous idea of a literal staff and a metaphorical staff that Jesus is talking about. If you were willing to just say, yes, this is a contradiction, but that doesn't upset the method of Christianity, I think it would be a much more defensible and respectable approach. But instead it seems that you're unwilling to admit that there's even a single contradiction in these texts.
I am saying that the texts are written from 4 different points of view.
Do they contradict each other?
And it is quite possible that on details, Matthew tells you things that are not in Mark, or different than Mark. Contradict Mark.
Contradict Mark.
Yes, contradict Mark. And so the point is, here's my point. You're acting... look at it this way. You would be scoring a point if you could say, God wrote 4 books and they contradict each other. Just like if you're able to say, Dinesh said this in the beginning of the debate and that at the end of the debate, Dinesh is contradicting himself. On the other hand, if we have 2 guys who are here today to go and write an account of this debate, right? And then we look at their accounts, which are authentic, first person, I was their accounts with a lot of detail.
Yep.
And one guy says, for example, the lights were dark. The other guy says the lights were dim. Or one guy says, for example, that Dinesh was sitting at a 45-degree angle. Another guy says it was a 50-degree angle.
Yeah. But
These are
now
not...
imagine,
and then someone goes, Dinesh was sitting at a 43.5-degree angle because he thought this was a way of maximizing his rhetorical effectiveness for the audience. People would be like...
Now imagine somebody said, Alex is wearing a blue jacket, and the reason he was wearing a blue jacket, someone said it's a blue jacket, someone else said it's a red jacket. Who cares? You're quite right. But if somebody said specifically, I know that the reason he was wearing a blue jacket was because there's an upcoming election in the UK that's just been announced, and he was trying to represent the Conservative Party. And somebody else said, I know that the reason he was wearing red, and in fact he told us himself that the reason he was wearing red is because he wanted to support Labour in the upcoming general election in his home country.
Okay, perfect
You would
example.
say, that is a contradiction and means that one of you wasn't paying close enough attention, not just to the colour of my jacket, but the very message that I was trying to get across.
That could well be true, but what I'm getting at is we know, just from normal experience, that if the 2 of us are sitting in a cafe and we see an accident, these kinds of differences are normal. So let's just say, for example, here's God.
So, Dinesh, he just kind of bloviates on and on saying the same thing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that part after this. But basically, I guess what he was saying was he's trying to make the point that, any of these differences or so-called contradictions are just difference of maybe writing style and But actually, Alex O'Connor is saying no, they're actually pointing out theological meanings behind these differences. And so, going like when they fled to Egypt, it fulfilled the prophecy, that the prophet talked about. Out of Egypt will the Savior come, or whatever. And Dinesh is trying to belittle that, like, oh, that's not a big deal. But it actually is, because it's supposed to have some kind of prophetic import, right?
Yeah, he just sounds like he does a lot of gaslighting, and then he kind of is dismissive of the issue that's being brought up to him. And then that makes it hard to even discuss the issue, because he's being so dismissive of it and then turning it into a whole different issue to minimize it. He's
Right.
talking about not trivial things that we may be perceiving differently at times. Stuff that doesn't matter, but like you said, if it's affecting the overall message, that can lead to a lot of confusion. So this issue needs to be addressed, and he just refusing to acknowledge that. He's just being very dismissive.
Yeah, being dismissive is not being charitable. It's just you're trying to deflect and gaslight and make you're trying to make it smaller than what it is, because people are, different. But
Right, because if people are coming to you and saying, hey, this right here is a problem for me, and that's what's causing you doubt, and I'm being truthful and honest with you, I'm telling you that's the problem for me, and you're just dismissive of it, you explain to me how that's solving anything. How is that making anything?
exactly. It's a failure, man. It just really fails
Yeah.
on every point. So I wanted to get to this other
Thing
one.
is, if I were to tell you that there is no empirical way
Yeah.
to prove this one way or the other, my faith, let's say, that there's life after death, is just as reasonable. Cool. The location of Sodom and Gomorrah.
You can't prove the historical existence of a person very easily.
Trying to find
Here's my
this.
point. You're acting ancient city there. It was. Turn to that. Let's
Do you
turn
think,
to that.
for example, that the slaughter of the Amalekites that I mentioned before,
Based upon
it's pedantic, but I'm happy to say yes.
one of them reads this story your way.
They just don't mention it. They just
If you look at the arguments between the Northerners and Southerners over,
and it's in that he was
Not for the
misread-
evidence of slavery,
He
but
was
for-
comes up with this ludicrous idea of a literal staff and a metaphorical staff. Tell the men who come and verify
of you and I write an account of it.
that God
Trying to
makes
find
the sun. And
Oh,
they-
yeah,
they
here
fall-
we go.
No,
In-
I mean, look,
The universe had a beginning.
What if most
So,
of the things
yeah, I wanted to get to this part where he's talking about the science, because this is really something that stumps a lot of people. I know it stumped me when I was a Christian, so let's take a listen.
In our format, we've agreed to do a flip where you've been asking me questions. Now,
oh,
let,
sure,
let me
yeah,
ask
no,
you
if,
something.
if you've got something to ask.
Let me turn around and ask you questions in a sort of what I think is a more fundamental mode, because it gets to what the Bible really is.
Let's hear it.
Do you think that the universe had a beginning?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I would suspect yes.
You suspect yes.
Yeah, sure.
How did the writers of the book of Genesis know that?
I have no idea. It could, I mean, if I'm going to
Think
be
they guessed?
if I'm going to be cynical about this, if they did guess, it would be a 50-50 guess. And I also think that if we had scientific...
Would it be a 50-50 guess?
Yeah, because, and it might even be worse than that for you, because if we had some kind of scientific popular hypothesis, because of course the Big Bang might not have been the beginning of everything, who knows, right? But like whatever the popular scientific hypothesis is, if it were pointing to an infinite universe, for example, as Einstein thought we lived in, then I'm sure that people would open Genesis. They would say that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and say that the earth just means the earth itself, right? Like I think it would be equally easily interpretable on either account.
All right. So one of my professors at Dartmouth was Robert Jastrow. He headed the Mount Wilson Laboratory, one of the great astronomers of the 20th century.
Sure.
So Jastrow writes in his book, God and the Astronomers, that for 250 years, modern science has been attempting to discover whether the universe had a beginning. And you can think of these scientists as ascending a very tall mountain. in which there are many pathways. And for many years, with the steady state hypothesis and so on, there were beliefs that the universe was eternal. It never had a beginning. In fact, that was the prevailing point of view. And then Jastrow argues it's almost as if we reached the top of the mountain and there was a bunch of Hebrew prophets or theologians sitting there who had been there from
Why does he have to bloviate so much, though?
I know, like, get
beginning.
to the point.
Just get to it, man.
So I'm describing now a skeptic, a true skeptic, and a true scientist describing the scientific shock that attends to a discovery that, and I think it is out of the spirit of that discovery for you to go, oh yeah, I mean, it could have been this. It's like tossing a coin. It isn't like tossing a coin. This is a question that's been argued for 2 centuries and only resolved in the last several decades, and resolved decisively in one side and the other. And the fact that you're not willing to just straight out say, yeah, it is actually an astounding fact that we now know.
No. I mean, look, the scientific method has also revealed to us that the Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. That is much later than the Sun. The Old Testament account, the Hebrew Bible account, tells us that it was the other way around. So it got that bit wrong.
All right.
Gotcha, bitch.
We got to hear that again. Hold on a second. Hold on. I
That
got to see
face
how
was priceless, though.
it is. He was just like dumbfounded.
That, and I think it is out of the spirit of that discovery for you to go, oh yeah, I mean, it could have been this. It's like tossing a coin. It isn't like tossing a coin. This is a question that's been argued for 2 centuries and only resolved in the last several decades, and resolved decisively in one side and the other. And the fact that you're not willing to just straight out say, yeah, it is actually an astounding fact that we now know.
No. I mean, look, the scientific method has also revealed to us that the Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. That is much later than the Sun. The Old Testament account, the Hebrew Bible account, tells us that it was the other way around. So it got that bit wrong.
All right. So we're, yes, the Bible is not.
So sometimes it gets things right.
No.
Sometimes it gets things wrong. You know.
The Bible is not
It's
a
not that
science.
astounding to
It's
me.
not listing out a scientific.
Well, now hold on a second. You can't now move the goalpost, especially if you're still gonna miss.
The
after doing
issue.
so.
Well, the issue of the origin of the universe is
You just
extremely
told me.
critical.
You just told me that Genesis predicted, or knew about, or somehow knew about the scientific hypothesis of the origin of the universe. Then, when I pointed out another scientific observation that doesn't accord with Genesis, you tell me that Genesis isn't a scientific text to begin with.
Well, if you read Genesis, it is making a astounding claim, which pertains to God. Obviously, God created the
Is
heavens
it making
and
a
the earth.
scientific claim or not? Is it telling us how the universe scientifically formed or not?
It's not telling us how the universe scientifically formed, because if it did, they would be outlining the history of the Big
Then what's
Bang.
the relevance of bringing this up in the first place?
Because it is stating a conclusion, not a process. It's not telling you how the universe was formed. It's not telling you about.
It also doesn't tell us how the sun was formed, but it tells us that it was formed after the earth was. It tells us that that's the case. That's wrong. It's incorrect.
Show me.
Oh, I don't have a Bible.
Okay. Well,
You're the Bible scholar.
Maybe a dozen times. I have never spotted this contradiction that you're describing. But I'll go back and look at it again.
You're fired.
But
You're
again,
fired.
On what day is it that God makes
You're fired.
the sun? Day 4? I think it's day 3 or day 4, something around there.
you're right. But
When's
but
light
the
mainstream
mainstream of the Christian tradition does.
When's the
It
heaven and
obviously
the earth
can't be
created?
day 4 because the concept of day in the original Hebrew doesn't mean day.
Sure, but day 4 comes after day 1, right?
Well,
How long
it's
day is.
describing obviously epochs or periods.
Yeah,
Yes.
so actually it's much worse, because now the sun is created much later than the earth was.
Well, not necessarily. Well, show me.
I don't know. I mean,
okay.
we can read through that. We can find Genesis.
Yeah,
if you like.
okay.
I don't know if that would be the best use of our time. I mean, we can do it if you really want to. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, it's not
Let's
astonishing.
move on.
it's
Let's
not-
move on.
Why not? It's not
Let's move on.
astonishing to me
Let's
that like if you
so
Oh
yeah, I
hell,
mean,
this is Comedy Central, and this right there is, first of all, not helping strengthening people's faith. That's making it worse. And secondly, the audacity to treat people who do research and also read and put a lot of time into things, to treat people like they're stupid and talk to them like they're stupid. The audacity. It's disrespectful.
Yeah, and it just makes you look like a clown. You're up there looking like a
Yeah.
freaking clown. I mean,
It
you're
can't even take you serious at this
show me,
point. Like,
show me. It's like, dude,
show
you're
me
the Bible guy.
you're the Christian, right? Like what?
Yeah, like you should know this stuff. That's the whole thing we were talking about. Wes Huff is that little cult.
Exactly.
It's the same way. But there's another points that people will make. Lee Strobel wrote a book. There's this apologist named Lee Strobel, and he made a book called Case for Christ, right? The Case for Christ. And basically, he talks about reasons to believe and reasons why you shouldn't have to doubt Christianity. Um, and so, let me find out where this is. Yeah, we're going to start it here. I'm just going to cue this up so we'll get ready. But yeah, Lee Strobel's an apologist, and he sold a lot of books to his credit. I mean, he's reached a lot of people. It's been pretty effective, and we'll kind of look at to see if see what the audience thinks, see what everybody thinks about this, whether he presents a good case for dispelling doubt.
Probably the greatest scholar in this area, Dr. James D.G. Dunn, says, this is a quote, he says, this tradition, by that he means this creed, we can be entirely confident, was formulated as a creed, as tradition, within months of the death of Jesus, within months. That is far too quick to write it off as a legend. In fact, one of the greatest classical historians who ever lived was A.N. Sherwin White of Oxford. He understood the rate at which legend developed in the ancient world. And he said the passage of 2 generations of time is not even enough for legend to grow up and wipe out a solid core of historical truth. Well, we don't have 2 generations of time passing here. We got a news flash.
Right.
And news flash, it goes right back to the beginning. So we have early, and we've got other early accounts right from the first century in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the book of Acts, and so forth. So Jesus was dead, execution, early accounts, which I believe discounts the possibility that it's a legend. Third E is for empty tomb. And there's lots of reasons why we believe the tomb is empty, but I think the most convincing reason is that even the opponents of Jesus implicitly admitted that it was empty. How do we know? Well, because when the disciples began proclaiming that Jesus had risen, what the opponents of Jesus said, we know there's some sources inside and outside the New Testament, that what the opponents said was, so, disciples, Jesus is risen. Opponents, the disciples stole the body.
Yeah.
Now, think about that. That's a cover story. They're implicitly admitting the tomb is empty. They're trying to explain how it got empty.
Right.
Right? It's like if you're a student, a teacher, and a student comes up to you and says, the dog ate my homework. That student's admitting, look, I don't have my homework, but I can explain what happened to it. The dog ate it.
Right.
It's the same thing. So everybody's admitting the tomb is empty. That's not the issue. The issue is, how did it get empty? And then the fourth E stands for eyewitnesses. Not only was Jesus' tomb discovered empty, but over a period of time, he appears alive in a dozen different instances to more than 515 people, to skeptics and doubters, to men, to women, to groups, to individuals, indoors, outdoors, daytime, nighttime. The disciples talked to him, they ate with him, they touched him. But here's what's interesting about the eyewitnesses. Remember I said earlier, in ancient history, we're lucky if we have 1 or 2 sources to confirm a fact. Well, for the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the resurrected Jesus, we have no fewer than 9 ancient sources, inside and outside the New Testament.
Here's the question I have about that. These so-called eyewitnesses, what were their names?
I only
Who were
know
they?
the Gospels, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then there's Paul. And Paul was the earliest, I believe. And even he said that 500 people saw him, but that's what he heard.
That's what
And
he
those
heard. That's not an
500
eyewitness. Yeah, that's not an eyewitness
and,
account.
And those 500 people are nowhere to be found now or at that time. So you
Right.
can't even go and verify from not even one of those 500 people.
Right. And even like we went over last week, the Gospels were written years and years after because of hearsay and we'll get into that too. I've got a video to discuss all of that as well. And
And
he's talking about. Hmm. Go ahead.
he's talking about it was a cover up story. Well, from what I remember, what was his name? Pontius Pilate or
Pontius
whatever.
Pilate, yeah,
The,
Pontius Pilate.
yeah, I'm German, y'all. Sorry. Uh, but anyway, he didn't want to do that, right? He didn't want to have Jesus crucified, but that's what the people wanted, and we see that today. The news convicts you before you're even convicted, and that's what the people wanted. They were offered an actual criminal, and he said, "Look, I got this dude Barabbas or whatever his name is.
Hmm.
He's an actual thief and everything else, and I'll give you him." And they're like, "No, we want that guy." So what if it made it look like, they killed him and they gave him a way out because they didn't really want to kill him? I mean, you could come up with all kinds of scenarios.
There,
We
yeah,
don't know.
there's exactly that's the whole point. Is that a lot of doubt comes from that uncertainty that this is history. They can't really verify that Jesus was God. They can't. History can't verify whether he walked on water, much less raise people from the dead or even be raised from the dead himself. It's just a lot of logical arguments, and a lot of for most people, logical arguments are not what got them into Christianity. Most any if you go to any church and you speak to all these little old ladies, they're not in the church because of the moral argument or the cosmological argument or all of these sort of arguments that these people are trying to make. These most of your average Joe Christians that are always doubting stuff are because they never really built their faith on any kind of evidence whatsoever. Usually, in my opinion, from what I've seen and in my experience and from what I've ever been told, people are the religion they are because of cultural reasons. They came up in it. If you have a greater chance of being a Muslim in Afghanistan than you do a Christian, right? So it's all based on where you were raised and other things. All of these arguments really don't build faith and they don't dispel doubt in my experience, even though I think that apologists do exist to help Christians not feel stupid. I think that's really what it's all about. But
To me, it's kind of
yeah,
like damage control.
yeah,
I
damage
understand you
control.
have I understand you have this doubt, but look at it this way. And it's just like you said,
Yeah.
they try to make you feel, they're trying to convince you.
And look, again, I want to make sure I tell everybody out here, if you're a Christian, I definitely don't want to shit on your religion. Like we're just talking. We're just here talking. That's all we're doing. We're just
Well,
talking.
I do.
Mhm.
Well, we are just talking, but I mean, I speak for me, and I'm like, it's more than that for me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah, yeah.
uh, I don't appreciate how Christians think because they believe that their religion is the ultimate truth, that they have a right to persecute others the way that they do. I don't like that. That's God didn't give you that authority, not even in the Bible. Maybe in the Old Testament, but not in the New Testament. If you're supposed to be a fisherman of men's souls, that's not how you do that. You're not really getting people on your side by calling them heretics and bashing them and stuff like that. And I don't understand why they can't just be okay with the people who say, "Hey, I don't believe in this," and that's just that. Are you telling me that you love me so much, a complete stranger, that you're gonna disrespect me, hunt me down, and everything else to make me believe this? That doesn't seem loving or charitable at all, you
Mhm.
know? And I'm actually upset by that because
Yeah.
it makes it hard for me or people like me to just be ourselves and to be who we are.
Right. right. And that's the thing. Before people can really understand each other, we have to really just have a discussion. And if it breaks down to name calling or gaslighting or shaming or something like that, like I appreciate that a lot of people bring up stuff that, like this guy here, in Laudatus Prophets, hope is immaterial and cannot exist in a purely materialistic worldview. So that's to say that people who aren't Christians or who are unbelievers, you believe in hope, but hope is not a material thing. So he's saying that he's doing an internal critique, saying that, in your worldview, it doesn't make sense. Your standards are different. You believe in hope and love, but you don't have that same standard for Christianity. And what I would say to that is that I don't think hope is a thing that exists in the same way that a person like Jesus supposedly existed. Like
But
hope is
that's
not a
not at,
thing, it's not a
that's
material thing.
that's comparing apples to oranges. The thing is, I don't believe in just any concept. There has to be some kind of proof to me that this concept works, even if it's an immaterial. A concept is immaterial, right? Love.
Right.
What is love? Love means different things to different people, but overall, we all kind of understand it in a similar way. And there's always some kind of evidence that manifests in reality to where we can say, okay, I can go with this concept because I can see results from it that manifest in reality, you know?
Right, right. And we could not, you could also still have the same exact problems with Christianity and still believe in God, still not be a materialist, but still have these problems because look, everybody's appealing to logic. We're all appealing to the same thing. We're all appealing to the same standards here. So by bringing up a standard about what atheists or materialists may say, doesn't do anything to prove your point. It's just a way to try to point the finger back at you to say, look, you're an atheist. Well, number one, I'm not an atheist, you could say. You could say I'm a Muslim, or you could say I'm a Hindu, or I'm a pagan, or whatever your title is, right? And you could say, and I don't follow the Bible for those same contradictions. Still don't believe in those claims of the Bible for the same reasons that the atheist doesn't. And so that's kind of a fallacy there, it's somewhere. It's like, it's not holding water. We're still all in the same universe going by the same stuff. It's like, let's be
Like
consistent, guys.
he's saying, I appreciate the question or the input to this guy. He's saying, right, so when your husband or wife tells you she loves you, you wouldn't be wrong for calling them a liar. Well, it's not that black and white. There are
Hmm.
things that will let me know if a person actually loves me or not.
That's right.
So look at the fruits of it, like the fruits of the tree, right? If I
Hmm.
say I love you, I'm not gonna be beating the piss out of you. If I say I love you, I'm not gonna be doing any kind of sadistic or hurtful things to you, right? So
Right.
love has to be shown with some type of action. Love isn't just a feeling, right? At least not as we all understand it. We have to see some type of, like I said, something that manifests in reality for me to be able to recognize that you love me. You can say you love me and it means nothing, absolutely nothing.
Right.
See what I'm
Right.
saying?
For me, the best way to know whether something is true enough, put it that way. I mean, after all, we could be all living in the matrix. We could all be living in some kind of brain in a vat, and what we perceive out here is not real at all in the way that we think it is. That could all be very true. But we still exist and we still experience this reality. And so we have to deal with it on those terms. But the best way to be valid in my beliefs, regardless of that fact, is predictions. Like if I could say, if this teaching is true, then X is going to happen. X should be the
Like a
result. like a
Yeah,
kind of like a scientific sort of experiment, maybe.
like
So I could say, yeah,
a
like,
mathematical.
equation, yeah, or
Yeah,
theorem, something like that, and say, like, maybe, if Jesus is true, then will God, if you're really true, if you're really true, burn a hole into my tree or sketch my name or your name into my tree in the backyard at 5:05 p.m. for the next 5 days. And I bring a
but
bunch of witnesses and we go look
that's
at it,
when
and if it happens, that would be evidence, at least, that Christian God is true. Now, it's not proof, because it could be the devil, or it could be,
right, but
they'll say all kinds of shit.
see, that's the problem with Christians. You are not even really allowed to ask those kind of questions because now you're disrespecting God's authority and God doesn't have to prove himself to you. And then they're going to give you the scripture where Jesus was on that mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And the devil challenged him and said, well, you are the son of God, prove it and throw yourself off this mountain. Surely you'll be able to save yourself.
Yeah,
And that's when you basically are shutting people down to even ask questions or make them feel bad for even having doubt in the first place from your very own Bible. So where do you go with that? It seems
right,
very communistic, in nature. What is it? God a communist?
right. God is not your cosmic bellboy to do whatever you want him to do. Okay, fine, I can accept that. And so it just leaves the doubter doubting. It doesn't really do anything. Now, is that really scriptural? Now, when I was a Jehovah's Witness, a lot of Christians may disagree with this because Jehovah's Witnesses are a little bit out there. But when I was a Jehovah's Witness, we used to always talk about this scripture where Elijah proved to these heathens that Yahweh was real, or Jehovah was real, and he called down fire from heaven to burn this wood. And where they prayed, nothing happened. Where he prayed, where Elijah prayed, it actually happened. And then he went out and killed those false prophets, because the false prophets were saying this and that. And he said, well, where's your God at? Is he on the toilet? Like, that's what he was asking. And Jehovah, though, on the other hand, did show a sign, did present, the fire and burn the wood. So actually, he was a bellboy for the prophet Elijah. So at least there's some kind of scriptural precedence for that. Now, anyways, we have Brooklyn Lou with us. How you doing, sir?
How you doing?
Hi.
Doing good, doing good.
Nice. I saw your stream. Figured I'd join in.
Oh, perfect, man. I'm glad you joined us. Glad you could be on the show. We love it when we have people that come in to discuss this stuff with us, even if you have like an alternative view. If you don't really agree with us, that's fine. We're all on our own spiritual path, so to speak. That's the way we kind of look at it, right?
Well, one thing I was wondering and thinking, I never take any issue with what anybody believes. All right. I think people can believe whatever they want. It doesn't bother me. What does get to me is when people think what they believe is better than what other people believe. And then they try to push what they believe on other people that simply don't buy what they're selling.
Right.
And that's why, like, for Christianity, all right, it's the evangelist part of it. All right. It's running on the street and telling people they're going to hell. That sort of thing just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what the purpose of that is.
Gotcha. If I could
I fully agree
say,
with you.
for me, the funny thing, I'll be a little pushback person here. For me, I don't care. Like, if people want to say I'm going to hell or condemned and they want to teach me that, the way that I could look at it, I can be charitable and say, well, they're only telling me this because they honestly believe this and they love me. They care for me. They truly love me and they don't want to see me go to hell. And I'll be like, okay, fine. If that's what you say, fine. Maybe I don't really believe that, but okay, let's go ahead and grant that that's the case, right? Well, that's why we have these discussions, so we can sort of present to the world an alternative view, or at least show possible reasons for why somebody's epistemology may be out of whack with these sort of claims, right? And that's sort of our protection. And even if, you find some epistemic soundness in Christianity or Islam or whatever it is, great. But we can always have that discussion and test it. I'm all for testing claims and testing it. Like, I'm not really into controlling what people believe and what they think and even what they do. Like, this is a free country. I love it when Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, if you can believe that or not. Because I love having these conversations and I love testing them and I love having that argument, but not
Are
everyone's
you
the
a
same.
do you have a relationship with Jehovah's Witnesses?
I used to when I was coming up. I think probably when I turned 20, I started studying, and then I became a Jehovah's Witness, and then I moved up in the organization and became a teacher and became very active in the organization.
Yeah, so you
So,
were part of
oh yeah,
that group.
very zealous, very zealous. I'd argue with pastors, priests, go door to door. It was my life. I loved it. It was my
Now,
thing.
may I ask
I
both
just
of
think.
you? Right, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to
No, go
ask,
ahead.
uh, when you're out there telling people what they need to believe, right?
Hmm.
Like you were talking, you used to, debate with priests and debate with different people. All right. Do you think that's really showing them love? I think it's just showing yourself love. It's like saying, I
Exactly.
need to be right. All right. And it's like checking yourself. And I,
Yes.
I can beat a priest in a debate, or, but if you get nowhere in that discussion and the priest or whoever you're preaching to has no interest in what you're talking about, it seems to me that a lot of that love goes away. It's like, oh, well, I wanted to love him, but he doesn't think like I do. So,
If I
I really
remember,
can't
if
love him.
if I yeah,
I
exactly. Like,
agree. I agree with him a lot because the way I see it, it's not like I can be the bit bigger person and say, okay, you don't like what I believe, and you may want to call me out and call me a heretic, and I can get over that too. But everybody's not the same, and not everybody can handle the same level of sometimes disrespect or harassment, because sometimes that's what it comes down to when you're crossing the line and you're making my life hard because I don't believe what you believe. That's when I think it's a problem. And so I call myself standing up for me and people like me. We have a right to think the way that we think, and you don't really have a right to persecute me. And let's face it, Christians have done a lot of persecution and really committed bad atrocities towards people who just didn't buy what they were selling, to the point
yeah,
where
and
you were forced to believe it. I'm just like, no, that stuff can't happen anymore. Y'all don't
yeah,
have a right to do that.
and a
No,
lot
that,
of, like, if I was to think back to when I was a Jehovah Witness, like what would motivate me, I used to always say, because I loved people and I want to show people that I don't want them destroyed or whatever. The thing is, it's funny how brainwashing works. If you go somewhere 5 times a week and you sit there for 2 hours and you hear people always tell you, you're doing this because you love people. You're doing this because you love people. You're doing this because you really care. You're doing this because you're looking out for your fellow man. And you hear enough of that and you have enough peer pressure, and everybody's talking the same language and saying and repeating the same, talking points over and over, you start to kind of believe it yourself. And so when you march out there to be God's little soldier, you're repeating the mantra. You know what I'm saying? And maybe
yeah.
you kind of do believe it, but it's an artificial belief. It was something that was sort of seeded in you and sort of cultivated, until into a full bloom of a tree called, a witness of God, a Jehovah's Witness, somebody who's out here doing the Lord's work. And so, yeah, so it's really weird how that works. But as far as you asked the question, is it really a form of love to do that? I don't think so now, because I don't believe what I believed back then is really true. So I was doing a disservice. But in my heart, because of being brainwashed, I might have thought I was, if that makes any sense.
Oh, no, it makes all the sense in the world, because your whole view of love itself gets distorted depending on these various beliefs you might have. All right. So, love in and of itself, all right, I don't think it should include always getting your way, or always getting people to think like you do. I mean, I would think, I tend to think a truer love would be accepting people for how they are. All
Yes.
right. In
Yes.
other words, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm an atheist. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just a stone cold atheist. All
Right.
right. It doesn't bother me that somebody believes in a God. All
Right.
right. And
Right.
like, my girlfriend believes in God. She's I guess, like a Catholic type Christian. All right. I don't judge her for that. I don't say, "Oh my gosh, now I need you to be an atheist."
Right. Right.
That doesn't
Right.
even enter my mind. All right. And
Right.
I don't. I
Right.
mean,
Because
I don't know
as
why
human
anybody
beings, we have a
would
lot of
believe.
other things in common. Sorry.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. I mean, and I will respect anybody's belief for them. But if they push it and push it and push it on me, what ends up happening is I have all the answers to rebut them anyway.
Right.
And then it becomes like, you know, this
A
contest.
battleground.
Right? Yeah, it becomes a contest and a fight and a deep argument. And as an atheist, I have all the rebuttals. I'm not an atheist because it was, I was a fundamentalist Christian for many years. So if I'm talking to a Christian, I've heard what they believe my whole life. Much
Mm-hmm.
of my life I heard it. So they're not telling me anything new. It's usually I'm telling them something new, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because they didn't
Yeah.
really encounter counter arguments. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that they can be really upset about that. All
Mm-hmm.
right. It bothers them. And they certainly don't seem to love me anymore.
Right. Right. Where
Yep.
where did the love go all of a sudden? Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
But for
in a
me,
lot of this propheta tells us plenty of evidence if you simply stop denying it. Well, my immediate thought is, well, present your evidence. But the other thing I want to ask is, do you ever doubt in your Christian journey? Have you ever doubted the things that you believe? Because it seems like the way that they speak, it's as if it's so obvious, like the nose on your face. And yet
And we're
we
just
have so
denying
many
it.
people. Right, we're just denying
It's
it,
just another. It's just another way of being dismissive of the facts that there is really no real evidence, which is the reason why people doubt it in the first place. And if you were so sure in your belief and you know it's so true, why do you have to indoctrinate people, persecute people, make them feel like they're going to go to hell if they don't believe it? You're doing too much. It makes you look insecure. Okay.
yes. Hey, I gotta go, but I'm gonna subscribe and I'll try to
Thank you
catch you
so
another
much.
time.
Well, thanks for
Yeah,
showing up. Nice meeting you.
All
nice to
right.
meet you,
Have a
Brooklyn
good
Lou.
one.
You too, sir. He was so nice, man. See, that's
Yes.
that's how you talk to people. Like, um, it's really interesting. But and just to continue on, we kind of got sidetracked there because I wanted to really talk to somebody. And again, if anybody wants to jump in and challenge us or express themselves, you're more than free, because that's what we're here for, man. We're here to have a nice conversation with everybody here. So, anyways, I wanted to continue with this because Lee Strobel brings up, and maybe I won't even show it, but I'll just mention it. so that we can save a little time at this point. Um, Lee Strobel's, I think one of his strongest points is that why would someone die for their faith? If somebody, this kind of proves it's true, because if you're willing to die for this, it's not like they died for a belief that Jesus was resurrected. They died because of a claim that he did resurrect from the dead. They, like these early apostles and people like that, they supposedly saw Jesus. That was their claim. We saw Jesus die, and I'm willing to die for that truth. So why would somebody be willing to die for something that they know is a lie?
Well, first of all, I highly doubt that somebody that knows it's a lie would be willing to die for it. That you would have to prove to me. But someone who actually believes it from the bottom of their heart, whether it's a lie or not, they believe it. They're convicted by it. And they may die for it. And a lot of people do that. Look at terrorists. Terrorists are willing to blow themselves up for their cause and for their Allah.
Right.
Or whatever they believe in. So then you are thoroughly convicted of something. Convinced of something. There is no telling how deep that can go. That's not proof, though.
Well, I had a debate one time with a Christian on this very topic. I think I was debating Matt Adams on this. And Matt told me, he said, well, the difference between the terrorists and the Christian is the Christian back in the first century, he saw Jesus resurrected and ran around talking about it, and he was willing to die for what he said was true. Not a belief that Jesus resurrected. So he was saying that the difference between the terrorist is dying for what he's told to believe, whereas these guys are dying for what they know is true. Now, it's got a lot of problems, and I wanted to go over it because it's such a really strong argument that Christians make here, and I wanted to kind of share that video too, because this is kind of explored, and this is coming from Religion, Atheism, and Science channel. Did the disciples die for a lie? So let's listen to what he's got to say on the matter here. I thought he did a really good treatment. He even mentioned Jehovah's Witnesses too.
So we have our list of people who, it is claimed, would not have died for a lie. Let's get to work on it. There are at least 3 problems with the "they wouldn't die for a lie" argument. Number one, the argument ignores the tremendous and demonstrated power of cognitive or psychological dissonance management among religious believers. Number two, the argument doesn't seem to be rooted in or consistent with Christian scriptures. Number three, the argument has little, if any, meaningful evidence to support it. I'll take each of these in turn. Okay, point number one, the argument ignores the tremendous and demonstrated power of cognitive dissonance management among religious believers. After over half a century of research and study, one of the best established facts about religious believers is that when they experience a disappointment with respect to their religious beliefs, especially, ironically enough, a significant disappointment, for example, the failure of a major prophecy, believers tend to be driven to neutralize the cognitive or psychological dissonance caused by such a disappointment and find a means of reestablishing cognitive consonance without sacrificing their religious beliefs. There's a ton of literature on this, but the best I've seen is an article entitled "When Prophecy Fails and Faith Persists," a theoretical overview, written by sociologist Lorne L. Dawson of the University of Waterloo in Canada. The article was published in 1999 and is now available online for free. There's a link to the right of the screen for those interested. I strongly encourage anyone watching this to read the article. One sees the phenomenon play out over and over again in religious contexts. For example, the significant prophetic failures of Jehovah's Witnesses in 1914, 1925, and 1975 did not destroy the organization. There are still millions of Jehovah's Witnesses around the world, including people who witnessed the prophetic failures. Believers successfully navigated the disconfirmation by finding ways to reestablish cognitive consonance without sacrificing their religious beliefs. Lubavitch Hasidim puked and rallied when their Rebbe Menachem Schneerson, believed by many to be the Messiah, died in 1994. It remains one of the largest and most vibrant Hasidic sects, and a significant number of its adherents still hail the late Rabbi Schneerson as the Messiah and await his return to earth. Believers successfully navigated the disconfirmation by finding ways to reestablish cognitive consonance without sacrificing their religious beliefs.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out because being a Jehovah's Witness, there were many who saw the events that happened in 1914 that were supposed to have been, the end of the world. And when the end of the world didn't happen, as prophesied, they just continued on. And in fact, many of them were thrown in the Nazi camps, and they died without ever, and they were given the chance to, renounce their faith. They were given the chance. If you renounce your faith, we won't kill you. And they said, no, we won't do it, even though they saw the failed prophecies. So I kind of look at like the Jesus story. Let's say Jesus was supposed to be the king. He was supposed to be the Messiah. And let's imagine, the way that the Jews imagined the Messiah. He wasn't supposed to die necessarily, maybe. Maybe they were thinking, and actually it surprised his disciples. Remember, they were surprised, and they denied him. But then they came back and they said, well, he died in a spiritual way. He resurrected. And so he's actually still the king, just not king of this world, king of the heaven. So they come up with all these different ways of reinterpreting so that they can hold on to their belief, even to the point of dying for that belief. Does that make any sense at all? Because that's exactly what Jehovah's Witnesses did. I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily smart to be that way. I mean,
Yeah.
it sometimes, it can come off as being courageous, and I mean, you stand for something. It can be inspiring, but at the same time, sometimes it seems foolish to be that way.
Yeah.
Especially if you believe in something that just absolutely makes no sense. But I don't care how strong your belief is, even if you're willing to die for it, it doesn't make it true.
Right. And it's like the Apostle Paul said, if Jesus did not raise from the dead, then all of our preaching and witnessing is in vain. We should just be merry, drink and eat and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die, if Jesus didn't get raised from the dead. So his faith in what happened was so strong that he was willing to forego eating and drinking and being happy in order to be, eventually killed and, persecuted by, the Romans and killed, just like Jesus was. And, people took a lot of stock in that, and they felt like that was a very strong proof that it must be true. But it's like you said, none of that proves anything. It just proves that they believe it for whatever reason they give you,
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's all it proves.
That's it.
Okay, continuing. Unfulfilled apocalyptic expectations failed to destroy early Christianity, which gradually reinterpreted the apocalyptic elements of its emerging belief system. Believers successfully navigated the disconfirmation, that is, Jesus did not come back, by finding ways to reestablish cognitive consonance without sacrificing their religious beliefs. Given the staggering consistency of this phenomenon, with disappointed religious sect after disappointed religious sect working to turn some major defeat into victory, it seems quite likely that Jesus' earliest followers, the core of true believers who were as deeply invested in their beliefs as generations of religious adherents before and after them. People who had given up so much to follow Jesus were not going to allow themselves to be stopped by Jesus' brutal execution and death as a political criminal. They successfully navigated the disconfirmation that was Jesus' execution by finding ways to reestablish cognitive consonance without sacrificing their religious beliefs. Among the ways they did this, and according to Dr. Dawson, it's one of the most common modes of dissonance management, was to deny failure. Jesus wasn't defeated by death, but rather God made him victorious over it. Of course, the details of what came to be regarded as Jesus' God-given victory over death developed significantly over time. One need only read the Christian scriptures to see this development play out. In the early stages, the victorious Jesus, quote, became a life-giving spirit. He was the one who was, quote, revealed in the flesh and vindicated in the spirit. He was, quote, put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. He was, quote, the great high priest who was passed through the heavens. Later on, as
That sounds very pagan.
That
Of
sounds
course.
good to me, though. It makes sense because honestly, it's more about the message rather than if the guy was really a man or not, which he probably was alive. But it's not about the physical aspect. It's about the mind frame, the type of thought that he
Yeah.
taught and how he moved. You know what I mean? And when he died, he just became bigger like any other legend because
Yeah.
that
And yeah.
concept resonates on through other people, and that's how it's kept alive. It's to believe that you have to believe this man rose from the dead is stupid to me because what would you get out of that? It makes more sense to say they tried to kill his message, but when they killed him, his message got bigger. And we see that
Hmm.
throughout history with any hero. So that's what it's about, you know? And that's the
Yeah.
only way you can perceive Christ or the Christ. You can't
Yeah. Because,
perceive him any other way.
the early Jews were expecting a Messiah, and a Messiah is somebody like Cyrus, or Alexander the Great, somebody who was going to fight for your people and free your people
Yes.
politically. And he died, and Jesus died as a political person. He was
Martyr,
preaching that,
yeah.
martyred for that, and he was speaking against the government, and so in the establishment, and so he was put to death, which wasn't part of the plot. But when he did die, ultimately, Paul came along and said, no, 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 y'all don't get it. It has nothing to do with all that. His message wasn't about all that. He's alive now in the spirit, and you can too. And he's bringing hope to you too. And he brought all this Gnostic kind of interpretation to the entire events. And it won out as we discussed last week.
Yeah. And we still see this pattern to this day. That's
Hmm.
happens to every hero. Jesus is an archetype, you know?
Right,
And
right.
me as a mystic, I'm very fond of Jesus. That's why I look at Christians like I don't even have anything against Jesus. I love
Right,
that guy. But
right.
I just don't focus on the part that you're trying to force me to focus on because I know that's not the most important part of the story. The most
Exactly.
important part of the story is what he stood for, who he was, like telling
Right.
these people that were stoned the lady to death that they accused of idolatry. My phone's dying, even though it's on the charger. This app drains the crap out of it, so I may cut off. But he said, "Who are you to judge her? Are you who is without sin standing here? Put your
Hmm.
rocks down." And you Christian apologists are the main one with the stones. Think
Yeah.
about that. Do some self reflection for once, man.
Yeah, and it's like establishment versus, the people with their own interpretation and private experience and things of that nature. It's the whole reason the establishment was against Paul in the early church. There was a rift between the Jerusalem, which was the establishment church, and Paul, who was kind of an independent mystic in a way, because he had an experience directly with the Lord, and he went on to build churches after that and teach after that and stuff like this. And it won out, oddly enough,
Mhm.
because he was able to appeal to so many in the culture, that were for Gnosticism and paganism and things like that. It had that flavor to it, and Rome was able to exploit it and become the Roman Catholic Church, and they were part of the authority, and it's just been establishment that then the establishment just kind of changed over to a whole nother paradigm. And now here we are speaking about, different ways to maintain your spirituality, whether you're a Christian or not. If you're still a Christian, you can still be a Christian. You can
Yeah, and
still,
I
yeah, you can do all that.
I
You
would
can
like to
worship. Yeah,
I would like to make an argument in support of that, saying
yeah,
in support of what you're saying. Christian will tell you, oh, the road is narrow and you can't do that and da 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 da. But I'm like, that Jesus character said, use logic and reason and mix reason together, right? You can come to the same conclusion in many different ways. Simple as that. I can make a point with a fable about a wolf and a girl that's being tricked by the wolf to make a point, a moral. I'm trying to convey some kind of moral to you. But if you were growing up in India where people have talking cows or something, that story might change a little bit, but you're still conveying the same point. There's so many ways you can approach things from different angles and still arrive at the same destination. We even see that in mathematics. You don't have to do math one particular way. You can do things different. There are different equations, different steps you can take to arrive at the same answer, and then you can go back and check it. It's what's the outcome of it. That's what you want to look at. Is the
yeah,
outcome the same? And so when they say you can't get to God except for the way that they tell you to, you're trying to shut down everybody else, and that's not okay. You just set yourself up as the authority, claiming you got it from God. And I'm here to tell you that's not okay, and y'all not gonna get away with that. Period.
yeah. You're very right. And for me, it's like if you're an atheist and this stuff is, you have no maybe a spiritual IQ, if you want to call it that. Like you have no way of sort of reconciling spiritual matters or things of that nature, even that whole topic of God and consciousness or being consciously aware of, none of that really resonates with you. That could just be the way that you're wired. And so atheism is great. And so I don't really care about what people believe. I care about what people do. Are you positive? Are you bringing love to the world? Are you being a more positive influence in the world versus a negative? I don't care if you're an atheist, an agnostic, a believer, a non-believer, whatever you are. That's what I'm really more important with. But instead of people suffering from all of this cognitive dissonance, if talking snakes and donkeys resonates with you, dude, go for it. Um,
Yeah, but
turn turn
don't
turn off turn
don't
yeah turn off our channel. Don't debate with us. Don't argue with us, because you got to understand we're not wired that way. We're not people that think
right.
that way. We don't
You're
really understand that, and so you're really talking to a brick wall, because
Yeah,
for
because
us,
we're not going to conform to that. You're making yourself God, claiming you got it from God, and you can fool some of the people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
all the
You
time,
know?
exactly. And some people love to take their comic book spirituality versions seriously, and for them, they're wired that way. For me to argue with them would be fruitless. All we can do is put out our content, and if they see something and it maybe opens their mind to a new perspective, great. If it doesn't, great. But we don't really engage in a whole lot of arguing with people or trying to make people think a certain way. I'm not going to shame you for it. That's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of the video is because we've been coming under a lot of attack from other Christians, all over the place on different social media platforms. I know I have. and they're all saying, "Oh, you don't think that Satan came in the form of a serpent and spoke to Adam and Eve? Really? You're stupid." I even had people IM me saying, "You're an idiot because of that." And to me, I think you're an idiot for believing that, but I don't want to really
They
go
call
there.
they call me an idiot. I mean, come on, what else is new?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, if you believe that stuff, that's great. It's good for you, but it ain't good for a lot of people, and that's what the show is about. Can we sit down and really have a conversation about it? And even with like with my views, a lot of atheists may disagree with my views because they'll say, "Oh, it's too airy fairy," or "You're just playing a semantic game by looking at God as reality and nature and stuff like that." And maybe that's true in your mind, and it has no utility for you, but it may have a lot of utility for me. And so we're different, and it's okay. I tried atheism for years and it just didn't work for me. That's just the problem for me. And we can have that discussion. I still enjoy discussing it with atheists and just as much as I enjoy talking to the believers, the theists and people like that. So if you want to jump in and ever want to talk about this, you can. In a lot of this propheta, you have a lot to say down there, man. You're busy in the comments, debating with everybody, like taking on the world. So come on in and speak to us if you want, man. We can have this conversation.
Well, unfortunately, my phone is being ridiculous.
Oh,
I'm dying.
okay.
I'm dying over here, and I want
I'm
to
dying
continue to.
here.
I want to stay in the show, but my phone is saying no. I gotta go. If you're still around when my phone charges a little, I might come back on. But
No,
I'm
I'm just kidding.
sorry. I'm
No, it's all good.
sorry.
I'm about to starve to death too, anyways. So I need to get something to eat. But it's been a great show. I mean, we're gonna have another show next week. I don't know what the topic's gonna be, but we'll come up with something hopefully interesting and engaging. And again, like and subscribe if you like what we do. We want to build a community. If you want to, buy us a cup of coffee or help us keep the lights on or whatever it is, you can send, something to our PayPal accounts. I have them listed below in the description. So anything you guys want to do, man, it's this show, this forum is for everybody. It's just not about me and Sophia. We're trying to open up a community. That's the whole goal here, is to open up a community where we can talk about epistemology and spirituality and really, have what are usually difficult conversations and make them fun and engaging, okay? We don't have to get all
Yeah.
into our feelings and butthurt about things, okay?
And
So,
Alex wasn't here today, by the way, because he had to work today. So just throwing that out there for anyone that may be missing him.
okay. Thanks a lot, Kyle. We'll see you later, man. I see you in the comments saying you got to go. You guys have a great day. And until next time, peace.
Peace.